Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
This is Panoramic Perspectives. I'm Elise Giamacco Carlson, and this is Carl L. Johnson.
Yep, you got it right.
2 weeks have gone by already. We're here with another show.
Yeah, it didn't take us long to
It went
think
quickly.
of something.
So what have you been doing for these past 2 weeks? Anything good?
Been doing things. Anything good? Yeah. Oh, well, I developed another and more egregious dental problem, if you want to hear about that. But hopefully that will be rectified. I thought having a tooth extracted was the solution, not the cause of the
You know
new
what
problem.
I think about tooth problems?
Yeah, well, you should have told me to keep. Well, I had to do it.
I meant positive things. Do you have anything positive going on?
Oh, yes, I'm getting a new car. It's
Yay.
not new, but it is my next vehicle. And
Very good.
I put a payment on that today, so that's secured. That's so I won't walk by the lot and find it gone.
All right.
Has happened to me before. So
been
that's a positive note.
I've been doing the same thing I do all the time, run the Historical Society, doing a lot of research on, lately it's been Snake Den Quarry in Johnston and also the Clemens Irons House, even though the Historical Society doesn't own it. Belongs to Historic New England, but I've been doing a little bit of research about that to help out the people who do own it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been taking up most of my time.
Yes, I read your copious note for the executive board meeting at Johnston Historical Society. I went through everything and I took some notes and all that. I'm very interested in researching Snake Den.
So what else is coming up?
We have some things for Panorama, not just me and you.
Once the winter's over and it starts to get warmer, we can start going into old creepy places again without freezing.
Well, the first thing I think we'll be doing as a team, as a unit, will be at the North Providence Union Free Library, and that's going to be during Teen Tech Week. They haven't selected a date for us, but it's probably going to be in mid-March, where we can give our presentation about technical aspects of paranormal research, which is always fun. That's
good because I'm going to be taking a class at the Rhine starting in March on technical investigation practices.
And we wonder how technical, well, of course you can get technical, but how technical can it really be? We are ever and always using devices that were specifically designed for something else, some other purpose, and then they've been incorporated into paranormal research. Except there are people who are really modifying devices and they're detecting.
Anything else coming up?
Oh, yes. We've got Paracon. Now it's going to be in the Ansonia Armory in Connecticut, and that is taking place on July 24th and 25th. And we are going to be featured. We're going to be speakers, in fact.
Oh.
Yeah. I got our pictures up and all that.
Wow.
So that's something I'm really looking forward to. Let's see who did. I got some notes on that.
Press our uniforms.
Yeah, I'll have a uniform by then. Yeah. Nick Grossman of Ghost Storm and Charles F. Rosary. Let's see his name. And he was. They are known together as the Shaman and the Showman.
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes.
That's a nice moniker.
Met them in Salem one time. They were very nice. Yeah, that'll be good to people.
And then further, I'm sure some other gigs will come up. Like we're going to be doing something probably in Burrillville at the Jessie Smith Library. I was on the phone with her today.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Laurie?
Yeah, with Laurie.
Oh, good.
And then come the big thing, because they're all grand in their own way. On October the 28th, Saturday, October the 28th, there will be Warren Seekers of the Supernatural, the third consecutive year. And that will be a fun and a fiasco, and they'll have more people than the building can hold, and that will be, be in Ledyard, Connecticut. I think it's the same place, but it's going to be.
Well, it's good to see these paranormal things get going again after a winter lull.
With these events, there are people I see once a year.
Yes.
At best twice a year. So it's always good.
Yeah, it's good to see people in real life and not just in
this reinforcement
online.
Yeah. But, so this is going to be an even busier year for us as Panorama. And we have one investigating. We have someone who's consulting us, and we have another one pending. Of course, it's non-disclosure at this point. We'll see what.
Even I don't know what's going on.
I feel you're on a need-to-know basis for those.
Oh well, one day at a time. So one night at a time. Yes. Here we are, Thursday night. We have a guest.
Yes, and he's in the back room.
He's in the green room.
Yeah.
And on Panoramic Perspectives, we usually have a paranormal person. That's a little too many P's. So we're going to bring on somebody with a lot of L's. We have Levi Lionel Leland.
Yeah.
Who is
LLC.
a let's see, I don't even know what words to use anymore. Aficionado, scholar, follower, studier.
It's whatever you like, whatever sounds the most appropriate,
Yeah.
Studier.
Okay. Yeah.
just an amateur everything, pretty much.
You're a
You know
very
what? I give
humble
you a
man
lot of
too.
credit doing that because, sometimes you find something that you're really interested in and you read a lot of books about it and you watch a lot of videos about it. And it's really hard to kind of put all of that information together and, remember what you've
Right.
read, remember what you've seen and, apply it and in your case, teach it to other people. So I give you a lot of credit without, having to take a class in it. But where are you going to take a class in Poe?
Right.
Except for the occasional, maybe there might be some English professor who has a deep interest who might teach a class about it, but it's not generally offered at most
just
universities.
to give him a basic resume,
Exactly.
I put together some notations. Levi is an independent Edgar Allan Poe scholar from Rhode Island. He has specialized in Poe's ties to Providence and on Sarah Helen Whitman, the poetess from Providence to whom Poe was engaged for a brief time in the year 1848. Levi created and guides a walking tour of Poe's Providence that had a successful debut in 2021. When he's not studying Poe or Whitman, you can probably find him sipping an iced coffee like a true New Englander and exploring old cemeteries with his pit bull mix named Ginny Poe. Haha, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Levi is an amateur artist, and an excellent one, I will say, an amateur artist, historian, writer, and anticipates being an amateur at most other things in the future. Uh-huh. To learn more about Edgar Allan Poe and Sarah Helen Whitman in Providence, visit Levi's website, which is, well, that's euphonious, EdgarAllanPoe.com. You can also find him on Facebook and Instagram by searching Levi Lionel Leland. There's
One and
nobody
only.
else
Very
named it.
illiterate. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is anyone else named that, honestly. So yeah, you can find me there. And thank you guys for having me tonight. I'm excited
Our
to talk
pleasure, yeah.
about
Thank you for being
all
here.
things Poe and paranormal and whatever else we want to talk about. And Carl, I do have some homework for you as you're having these dental issues, right? Read Berenice if you haven't already by Poe. Speaking of dental issues, you might find that one kind of funny
That's
and
torture.
relatable.
Yeah, I probably will.
It has
Yeah.
to do with
Just
people
don't read it before your procedure. Read it after.
Maybe I'll hold it up during, just to amuse
It
myself.
might be a good distraction. Yeah, it might.
Drop my phone in my mouth. Yeah. Okay. Well, now you woke up one day and decided, I think this guy, Edgar Allan Poe, is magnificent, and I want to follow him and I want to read all his works. Now, how did you first become entranced? I'll even step back a little bit about Providence. What brought you to Providence? Were you born in Providence and grew up here? Or?
Native to Rhode Island, at least. I was born in West Warwick, raised in Coventry. I'm living in Coventry now, currently. And so Providence, I was just drawn to because just the history outside of Poe that Providence is so rich with, and the culture and the art. It always fascinated me. So when I gained this interest in Poe and then found that Poe had his own connection to Providence, everything just kind of came together and clicked. And I was like, this is perfect. I can celebrate my interest in Poe and also celebrate this incredible city that has so much art and history in itself, but also now it's connected with Poe. And it's like everything just kind of fell together. It was perfect. And oddly, Providence didn't really have too much of its own claim to Poe, at least there wasn't any kind of institution or physical place that was really celebrating him and kind of celebrating their claim to Poe. I mean, the Athenaeum mentions him, of course, and it's kind of local lore. The Sarah Helen Whitman house and the St. John's churchyard was a hangout of his and everything. And you've had people like you, Carl, who have put on events and stuff to celebrate Poe and Whitman in Providence, but it was just, there was nothing, solidifying really. So I thought that a tour would be a perfect way to gain some interest and to kind of help, spread Poe's legacy in Providence to, locals and even beyond. I mean, I've had people come from Massachusetts, even down south, South Carolina. This family came up. They came for Lovecraft. I'll say it. I'll admit it. They traveled here for Lovecraft, but they also saw that there was the Poe tour, so they came on that too.
Come for Lovecraft, stay for Poe.
Exactly. That's how I like to say it. So yeah, Providence and Poe just kind of fell together incidentally, really.
Well, Providence has its own zeitgeist. It's almost indefinable, but it's kind of glum. It's eerie. It's mysterious.
It is. It's full of just this uncanny kind of energy, I think, it's like a perfect balance of old and new, you got the hustle and bustle of the city now, but then also this deep, rich history that still kind of filters through all that. So you go to Providence and there's just so much, you're just very stimulated, I just can't put it to proper words, but the east side where the Whitman house is, the Athenaeum, and you have Swan Point Cemetery and the North Burial Ground. Those are my favorite hangouts. That's my favorite part of Providence, but
that's where we run into you.
That's where we tend to run into each other.
We met you in a cemetery nearly 2.5 years ago now.
I thought I uploaded a picture of the cemetery, St. John's, and also her house, and they don't seem to be here. I don't know what happened. But I do have a picture of us standing across the street from Sarah Helen Whitman's
perfect.
house. And it's with you.
And that's me. Yeah, we were really cracking up on that one. I
think
that was a fun tour.
I think Elise said something that, just got to us. I don't know. Well, always along with you,
She must have. We were really having a good time on that tour. Remember that one? And
well, she has a very spontaneous wit. So she had said something you usually. I don't remember what it was. I wish I did.
I wish it was, but the picture captures the moment, and I just wish I could remember the context.
Wouldn't expect, because you were like in kind of a serious moment talking about Edgar Allan, and she came up with some quip, and we were like, everybody was laughing.
It was perfect.
There's a picture of us looking a little more like we were reading Poe.
Yeah. There we go.
Well,
which is what we were doing. That is in North Burial Ground, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, right. That was a couple feet from the Power Whitman lot, and that was another fun program. People are always so interested in Poe.
At least has kind of a resemblance to Sarah Helen Whitman there.
I agree. I agree with the black dress and the shawls, and I definitely can see a resemblance.
Me, I suppose I'm just being Barnabas Collins there or something.
Here's the stone we were standing across from.
Yes, that's Sarah Helen Whitman, of course, on the right, and then her younger sister, Susan Anna Power, to her, to the left. And her sister was another interesting character. She did suffer some mental illness, which tended to monopolize the household. But after their mother died in 1858, Whitman took on full responsibility of her younger sister. And of course, as you can see, the death dates there, Susan died just about 5 months, late December, before Sarah Helen Whitman did. So Whitman had responsibility of her sister for pretty much her whole life. And it proved to be quite a burden to her. But, she was pretty devoted to her family. So,
yeah. So Sarah Helen was considered in her time. So she was a part of the spiritualist movement.
Yes. Yeah,
which was very much in vogue, and Poe did not kind of detested himself. But
Poe
as a whole.
Yeah, I think Poe hated anything that seemed too mainstream for the time. Poe was always trying to go against the grain. So, that's why he scoffed at the transcendentalists, because he just figured, or he thought, they were just being, hip and current for the sake of just being hip and current, not because they actually believed in these ideals. So things like spiritualism and all those huge progressive movements and ideals of the time. Poe is totally, he was like just scoffed at it. You
Very
know,
outspoken against his animosity towards that movement and that way of thought. Didn't he make he rubbed certain key figures the wrong way by criticizing them openly, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Walt Whitman,
yes,
Henry
Longfellow. He
Longfellow.
yep, he called Longfellow a plagiarist. So, you
Not a
know,
good career move. Why would he do these
no,
things?
Poe, to me, my perspective on Poe is that he knew what grabbed attention, and as much as people believe that he was just some kind of uh, jerk, just some kind of slighted person that just had to get his revenge. That I don't think that was it. I think that he just knew what the public wanted. They wanted scandal. They wanted to see two authors going at it, and they wanted to see all the gossip and
Mhm.
magazines and newspapers were a huge thing at that time, and those were the main outlets for these figures. So, when Poe published this, article on Longfellow and labeled him a plagiarist, now this was like hot gossip, so people would rush to the publisher. They'd grab these, newspapers, these magazines, whatever it was, and they were just eager to read whatever this new, crazy statement was by Poe or by anybody. So Poe just knew what sold, I think. And yeah, he was just always trying to create some kind of controversy or at least change people's minds about, what life was like or what these, what the public really thought about certain figures and stuff. He just decided, let's think the opposite, just to
Well,
really get people going.
by trying not to saying he didn't want attention.
Right, exactly, and yeah,
Worked. Reverse psychology.
Yeah, kind of
in a
rather
way, yeah,
in a misanthropic strain. And but like you point out, he pretty much seemed to know what he was doing. He wanted to go against the grain, and clear off
yeah,
the dust, unvarnish, literature.
yeah, and I think he pretty much did that successfully. I mean, he created genres. I mean, the mystery genre
Yes. Oh my word.
single-handedly, and he's credited with pioneering science fiction, and of course horror was a genre that he perfected, and he was known for so much in his lifetime, and he only lived 40 years. He
Yeah,
accomplished
a lot
so
of people
much
recognize
in
that
such a short time.
And
because
that,
of the styles. People
yes.
think he was a lot older when he died.
H.P.
Yeah,
Lovecraft had that in common with him. Their abbreviated lives. You pick up, the collected works of H.P. Lovecraft or Edgar Allan Poe. You've got a real hefty tome there.
yeah,
They spent a lot of time
yeah,
writing.
and both those photographs that were just shown were taken in Providence, Rhode Island, in
Westminster Street, yeah.
1848. So, and those are, especially the latter one, that's an incredible likeness of Poe. It's the most, I think, commonly used in anything pertaining to
At
him.
least kind of bring it back if we can, yeah.
Yeah,
What's the story here? There is a story to that.
there is a story, So this daguerreotype, is what the form of photography was called. It was named the Ultima Thule, and that was labeled by Sarah Helen Whitman herself. She took the term from Poe's poem titled Dreamland, and if the stanza in which she pulled it from went something like, "I have reached these lands but newly from an ultimate dim Thule, from a wild, weird climb that lieth sublime out of space, out of time." And it's a Latin term. It means extreme limits of travel and discovery. So she pretty much thought that this photograph represented a very profound, thoughtful Poe. But many others disagree. It shows a more haggard, worn down, disheveled Poe. And that might be because it was taken 4 days after he attempted suicide and 1 day after he had a very heavy drinking binge at the Earl House Hotel in Providence, where he was staying.
Didn't that tendency lead to the dissolution of his engagement?
It did. because of the vice he struggled with, which was alcohol, Sarah Helen Whitman did call off the engagement. It was one of the conditions that she made him agree to in order for the marriage to take place. And apparently, just 2 days before the wedding was to happen at St. John's Cathedral, fun fact, on Christmas Day of 1848, that was the wedding date. It was set. It was going to happen. Someone passed her a note while she was at the Athenaeum, and it had informed her that Poe was seen drinking. He'd called for a glass of wine at his hotel the night before, and he was intoxicated. But we don't even know if that's true. It could have been a sabotage. It was no question that her family and her friends, they loathed Poe. They had wanted nothing to do with him. They didn't want him near Sarah Helen Whitman. They thought he was just after her money, or her mother, Sarah Helen Whitman's mother, said that she would rather see her daughter dead than married to Poe.
Wow.
Well.
Yeah.
Not
So tell us,
ingratiating,
how you really feel.
Yeah.
Incredible. And yeah, that's another great picture. Now
I like this one.
this is a really cool engraving. Now, this was actually pasted by her in one of her editions, Hours of Life, her first published edition of poetry in 1853. And so that copy was gifted to William Walter Coleman, which was one of her friends here in Providence. He was a photographer. And that copy is in the collection of the John Hay Library. So I found this picture in that book, and before now it was unpublished. I hadn't seen it anywhere. So it is documented and posted up on my website. But that's a really interesting image of her with the shawl tied around her head. It's supposed to depict her as a medium, because she did dabble in, speaking with the dead.
I've never seen an etching like her eyes look real. It looks like a photograph.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. There's something kind of eerie about it almost.
Yeah.
It's
The
very
shadowing it's like really from life.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And she was quite attractive. She was an attractive woman, but there was also something kind of ethereal about her. She wasn't traditionally attractive.
Yeah, traditionally beautiful, not a beauty in the traditional sense, but
right, but kind of this ethereal attractiveness to her, and especially something that Poe would gravitate towards, of course.
Now it's Poe though. Now that's a very a different aspect of her.
Yes, yeah, that's her much younger. That painting was done by Cephas Giovanni Thompson. And that was done from life, an oil painting, shortly after she became a widow around 1833. So she would have been about 30 years old.
Right.
And yeah, the bonnet is representative of a widow's bonnet. And yeah, she's looking a little bit more dainty, a little bit more womanly in that, with the colors and the shawl around her arm and the white dress and the curls, but she actually didn't really like this painting too much. She said it was unfinished. And I'm kind of, puzzled at what about the painting is unfinished in her opinion, but it could attest for why she had the second painting done that's in the collection of the John Hay Library, the painting by John Nelson Arnold. It's the oval painting where it looks, it's a little bit more refined.
Up and out of existence there.
Yeah, and she's looking a little bit more, refined in it, and believe it or not, she's looking more as Poe had described her in his poem that he wrote for her. So it was almost as if she was like, she wanted to be memorialized as Poe had described her, which is quite interesting, given the whole tumultuous end of their romance. And,
I don't think there are too many literary descriptions of Edgar Allan Poe's physiognomy, but we can, there's so many photographs of him. One, I don't remember the source. Someone described his eyes as, what was it? Deep pools of pensivity. I think I can get what they meant by that. Deep
Yeah.
pools of pensivity.
I just found that oval. Oh, well, one.
Oh, the
Oh,
oval.
yes. Yep. So that's a copy of it, and yeah, that's that oval. So you can see where it's similar to Thompson's painting as far as how she is presented, but there's differences in her dress and the veil on her head, and so yeah, much more as Poe described her as this ethereal woman clad in white shawls under a midnight moon. It's kind of neat. It's interesting. But that was the photo there that she wished to go down to posterity.
Of course, that's that story about when Edgar Allan Poe first beheld Sarah Helen Whitman. I know the circumstances.
Mhm.
I believe it was it was rumored that it was a full moon, and he was taking a late walk. And well, you tell.
Yeah, of course. You're right. It was in 1845. Poe had came to Providence for the first time. He actually was here to see the lecture of another literary lady he was kind of smitten with, Frances Osgood. So she was lecturing at Howard's Hall, and so after the lecture, the two of them decided to take a little stroll along the east side. And so that's when they encountered Sarah Helen Whitman in her rose garden in the back of her house. And it was late. And it said that as they were traveling north on Benefit Street, Poe had glanced down Church Street as they rounded that little corner there. And there he spotted Whitman. And he was just entranced immediately. And so Frances Osgood was acquainted with Whitman. They were friends. They knew each other. So Osgood offered to introduce Poe to her right on the spot, and he declined. He was very adamant. He was like, no, 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 no. I don't want to be introduced to her right now. I'm just entranced by her beauty, and that's it, And so they kept on their walk, but that image of Whitman, tending her rose garden, wearing white flowy shawls and veils under the moonlight, it left a perpetual mark on Poe's mind. And it was 3 years later in 1848 that she had incidentally published a poem to him, a Valentine. And she didn't know he had known of her. She didn't know that he had seen her in her garden 3 years prior. She was just publishing this tribute to Poe. His writing and his genius was quite well known. So she was just publishing this contribution to Poe. And so once he saw that he had caught her attention, he decided, hook, line, and sinker, let's pursue this. And so he did. And so it was shortly after that he came back to Providence in 1848, a few months later, and they started courting. And that courtship led to an engagement. It was all very brief, all very tumultuous, but it happened. And that was a story of Poe and Whitman in Providence. She did deny his proposals quite a few times. And he was persistent. And finally, she agreed on the condition that, she get her mother to consent and that he stopped drinking. And as I had said previously, that promise of not drinking led to the inevitable end.
Anecdotal about Poe and Whitman. Is it true, do you think, that he begged her not to leave him or to see him one last time, or there was something to that?
There's so many conflicting accounts of that. And now I tend to go by Whitman's earliest recollections of that moment, because as she aged and as she got older, her accounts, she tended to mitigate the whole situation, and she kind of started to forget certain facts, and she made the whole ordeal less dramatic as it really was. So her earliest accounts recollect that yes, that Poe, as they had their big goodbye, she was so stressed by the situation that she had taken her ether, doused her handkerchief, and inhaled and passed out on the sofa. Now, she did have a heart condition, or she believed she did. And so a doctor had prescribed this to her, ether, and And today that's the equivalent of like chloroform. So inhaling that frequently is not good by any means. That cannot be helping your health. But a doctor had prescribed this to her. So in moments of great distress, when she thought that her heart would burst, she would remedy it by huffing ether, essentially. And so, obviously this confrontation between her and Poe resulted in that. And so she had fainted on the sofa, and he just knelt down by her side, and he gripped her hand so tightly. And all he did was beg her to just say that she loved him. That's all he wanted to hear. And then he would go. So she regained a little bit of consciousness. She looked into his eyes. She uttered a final "I love you" before she slipped back out of consciousness. And that's when Whitman's mother, Anna Power, who was present for the whole thing, had seen enough, and she kicked Poe out of the house. She was like, "That's it. We're done here. Poe, get out." And she kicked him out of the front door, and that was about it. He got the train back to New York, and they never saw each other again after this. Poe is dead 10, 11 months later in Baltimore, Maryland. Never really got a final goodbye between the two of them, a proper one, I should say.
Sarah had asked, Sarah Joseph had asked, is Sarah Helen, is she known to haunt any place in Providence?
I'm sure many people would say that. The Providence Athenaeum is a big one. Not only did Poe spend a lot of time there while he was here, but Whitman did her whole life. She loved that place. It was a short walk from her house. And it had all the books, all the information, all the literary journals and the magazines that she needed to keep up with her, her own endeavors, her own pursuits. And so she lived at that place. So people, I think, want to say that she's probably seen, floating among the stacks here and there every now and again.
Yeah.
She also loved St. John's Churchyard. That was a frequent place, a hangout for her, where she would, get some fresh air and stroll a little bit. It was right in back of her house. And she did take Poe there while they were courting. They did stroll among those old graves. And Swan Point was another cemetery in which the two of them spent a lot of time. But yeah, so I mean, go to St. John's Churchyard, go to Swan Point, go to the Providence Athenaeum. You might just see a ghostly looking woman who is a ghost named Sarah Helen Whitman.
I'm looking at the picture of St. John's Churchyard, which of course used to be King's Cemetery and was changed during the incipient revolution. It was changed to St. John's. And we just got a message from somebody named our friend John L. And she said, "Darn, I'm late, but here I am." And I think she's in
better late than never.
She's pictured there. Yeah. Now, is that where Edgar Allan Poe proposed marriage to Sarah Helen Whitman, or do some people just want to believe that?
That's a great question.
Like me.
So this is kind of based on a lot of conjecture. We don't really have definitive statements of where exactly Poe proposed to Whitman, but Whitman does account for this proposal in her sonnets to Poe that she had written after his death. And so in those sonnets, she talks about the proposal, and it was in a cemetery, but she mentions moldering stones. She mentions the rolling hills down to the Seekonk River. And so obviously St. John's is not anywhere near the Seekonk River, really, or is not attached to, but Swan Point is.
Yeah.
So if we kind of put all these facts together, it's more likely that Poe did propose to her at Swan Point Cemetery. Even aside from that, when you're in St. John's Churchyard walking around, you can look straight up and, to the south a little bit, and you'll see the back of Sarah Helen Whitman's house and the windows to that house. And as I had mentioned, that's the front of the house. So if the back, you see a clear view of the windows. It's looking straight down at St. John's. I just imagine Whitman's mother, Anna Power, just like glaring at Poe through those windows, like
yeah,
putting daggers through his giant head with her eyes. And, like, I just don't think it would have given Whitman and Poe much privacy. I think they would have been a little, nervous, kind of courting under the scrutiny of Mrs. Power. So I think Swan Point would have been a better place for them to go to kind of get more privacy. And plus it was a much larger, more quaint, not so quaint, but beautiful. It was open. It was
like
built as a park.
bucolic.
Yeah, exactly. It was like one of, the first garden cemeteries in the United States, from including Mount Auburn, I think was the first, but Swan Point was one of those first garden cemeteries. So yeah, they spent a lot of time there. And North Burial Ground as well too. It's likely that they traveled. It was closer to her house. So
yeah, there's the rolling hills, but no Seekonk River.
Right.
Yeah. And yes, Sarah's house is a private residence now. Nobody can go in there.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, they're probably sick of seeing me lurking outside the house. I'd like to go in it one day. It's the property.
Waiting to pluck some roses out of that garden.
Right. That's all I do. I'm surprised I haven't been arrested yet. But yeah, it's quite funny that it's closed off to the public because it's such a historical place, and Poe is there. Whitman obviously was there, but it's owned by the Episcopal Church now. I think it's been made into like 4 separate apartment units now.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and it's just private residences.
And I have a photograph of me when I ducked into St. John's Church. I was there for about 10 minutes, looking around in there. I mean, they were doing.
Oh yeah.
They invited me in to St. John's Cathedral.
That's great. I'd like to get in there someday. I've never been inside the church itself, and I'd love to, because that's where Poe and Whitman were supposed to marry. So I'd like to go in and kind of see what their wedding would have looked like inside the church. Yeah,
I'll see what I can do for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now Sarah Yosef asked, did you have any, do you feel that during the tours the energy changes? Do you feel energetic changes when you give the Poe tours? And I want to ask, do you have anything odd to report from these tours? Anything really extraordinary? So
that's a good question.
Both of those questions.
It's funny. As far as paranormal goes, I feel the heaviest sense of Whitman when I'm outside the house that she died in. And I'm not super in tune with those energies, but something about being outside that house, I feel as if she's in the house looking at us in a way. There's some kind of energy, there's some kind of presence of her at that spot specifically that I kind of notice the most. But other than that, I don't get a lot of Poe essence in the tour. There's one little stop in the tour that we do right in front of the front door of the Whitman residence, the red house that was just previously pictured. And there I do get the most sense of Poe at all, if any, because after he sat for that daguerreotype that we were talking about earlier, he had gone to the house and he was in great distress. He was banging on the front door. When Whitman's mother answered, she kind of calmed him down by giving him a cup of strong coffee. And then when Whitman was when she conjured up the nerve enough to see him, he clung to her so tightly that he tore a piece of her dress that she was wearing. And he was just begging her to save him from some terrible impending doom that they had no idea what he was talking about, but he was frantic. So they called a doctor, a local physician, Dr. Oki, and he came and took a look at Poe and said, well, just keep an eye on him. He'll be all right, But when I picture that in my head and when I'm telling the story and I'm right in front of the house and standing at the door, that's when I get the strongest sense of Poe, there's just something about it that really resonates, and it's just it kind of gives you a chill, up your spine a little bit.
Normally in control of his disposition, at least outwardly, to have what we would now call a panic attack and have that overtake him.
Yeah, it was quite unusual. He usually, like you said, maintains some composure to himself, and you know, he really kept an image that he, you know, liked of himself, that was refined and gentlemanly and you know, intelligent. But you know, there were times when that slipped because of just, you know, the traumas in his life and the losses, you know. And right there too, that's a great one. That's showing a more refined
Right.
part of Poe, taken from that daguerreotype, and yeah, more refined a bit, showing a more dapper, put
But they
together.
cleaned them up for that one, yeah.
For sure.
Our listener, Jung Sardi, said that first the etching portrait of Sarah Helen Whitman looked rather eerie and haunting. Some of the eyes are deep and mystical looking.
Yeah, and that's kind of what, like Elise was saying, they look so lifelike. It's
Yeah.
there's something eerie about it, you know.
Yeah, we do have a listener in Indonesia, by the way. That's Jung.
Oh, great.
So you're getting more known right now. Yeah.
For sure.
You want to ask this question from Denise Sempe?
You can.
Okay. It's been debated that Poe based the mystery of Marie Roget on a murder that he may have actually committed. Mary Rogers was the victim's name. Well, that's
on a murder that Poe committed. Interesting. So
that he may have committed. Yeah, actually have committed. Poe doesn't seem like a murdering type.
No, he wrote about murders. I don't
Yeah.
think he murdered anyone himself, at least not you know, that we know of.
He did,
But
though he must have done so creatively.
This question might be so. The Mystery of Marie Roget was one of 3 of Poe's Dupin detective series. So, in which he created the detective genre, and this story was based. It was based on an actual murder of a cigar girl. I think her name was Mary Rogers, or
not Roget.
Mary Rogers, yes, as Denise had mentioned. So, and she was murdered in New Jersey. I think she was found off the banks of some river. I'm not too familiar with the geography of it, but I think it was New Jersey. She was found in the river, this murdered woman. And so Poe had based this story off of that murder. But of course, he set it in Paris, you know, where and renamed the victim Marie Roget to make it more French, and it kind of suited his template for Dupin and those 3 stories. Now, the first one was The Murders in the Rue Morgue, published in 1841. That was about that killer orangutan that had escaped from the sailor and killed the 2 women in their apartment. That was the first murder story. And subsequently, the Mystery Marie Roget and the Purloined Letter. And so with those 3 stories, Poe had created every template for a detective genre that we know today. So one being a detective solving a murder that had happened. The murders in the Rue Morgue. The Mystery of Marie Roget, where the detective was trying to solve a murder that happened somewhere else, and they were trying to solve it from afar, not on location. And then the third one, the Purloined Letter, being where the detective was trying to solve the crime, the mystery, as it was happening. So, and now if you look at every story, movie, play, whatever it may be, that's a mystery based.
Yeah.
Those are the templates, really. It's one of those 3 templates in the story. So Poe created all of that, you know.
Printed by Edgar Allan Poe and so popularized today. Wow.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So no, I don't think Poe murdered the Mary Rogers girl, but he did. It was an actual murder, and Poe did base his story on it. Yeah. So
No, I should feel this. I should ask this. Do you believe that Sarah was the inspiration for Lenore?
Lenore, that's interesting. Poe has so many women in his life, and I love trying to make those connections as to which women were which characters and subjects for which poems. That's a good question. I don't know. Sarah Helen Whitman believed that she was the inspiration for Annabelle Lee, which was a big stretch. And the only justification to this is that she had published a poem prior to Annabelle Lee. I think it was titled "Our Island of Dreams," and pretty much in the poem, she had written a line that said, "The night wind blew cold on my desolate heart." And in Annabelle Lee is killed by a wind coming out of the cloud, chilling and killing Annabelle Lee. So she thought that Annabelle Lee was a response to Whitman's poem, but it's super unlikely. It's super unlikely. I think it was just a coincidence that those lines were very similar.
I think for the Raven, I think Poe incorporated elements of different women who had been in his life.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the
Virginia
best
mostly.
explanation is, yeah, I think many of his, his characters, his women were just culminations of all the women in his life that he had lost and suffered a loss of. And not only that, but Lenore, he came up with that name for the Raven because it had a long O sound. And in that poem, you notice there's a lot of long O sound, nevermore, Lenore. And he did that because he imagined that poem being read aloud, so he wanted it to sound kind of dreary and sad and lugubrious, as well as be a sad, tragic poem. So Poe is trying to touch on all senses, when he wrote, and it makes that, I think that's what attests to his genius so much,
There's an array of emotion evinced through that song, that poem. It almost
Yeah.
is a song, like he starts off, he's actually bemused, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the majesty of that poem is the way Poe weaves it. It's probably not structurally a perfect or even sublime poem, but it has its own grandeur. And the narrator, who's probably a student and he's mourning someone he's lost. He knows. Poe specifically states that the narrator of that story, of that poem, knows the raven can only speak that one word. He says, surely what it utters is only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master. So he knows this, yet he still drives himself to distraction,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get that bird to say one more thing, because he'll have reclamation. If he can get that bird to say anything but nevermore, which he takes to be his name, then maybe there'll be balm in Gilead. Maybe he will see Lenore again, and of course he can't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that ultimate irony, and the tragedy that reflected Poe's life so often. And I think that's what makes his works so incredible, is that they truly resonate with his life, and they're very real. They're very real emotions and real thoughts and real experiences that he put in these poems and these stories, in a way, not totally down to every last detail, but they all came from somewhere so raw in Poe that, that it's why they're so great. They're just so real.
Yeah, I actually, I'm so taken with that poem, The Raven, that I added 2 stanzas to it. It has 18 stanzas, in that frame. And I added an 18 and 19, so it went up to 20 verses. And I looked at it and I said, I can never read this publicly. The wording is kind of cool, but it's not in Poe's meter. And, it's obviously not by Poe. It was just a goof that I did it. And I said, you arrogant little,
That's still interesting, though. I love it's such a good, like, creative exercise, is to add to
try and make
an
it
existing work and make it something else, or just change the whole dynamic of it by, putting your own spin on it. I think that's a cool exercise for people to try.
Yeah, I couldn't make it convincing, but as far as actually being by Poe, but what my intent was to make a connective section where it goes, because the narrator of the poem, he's like flailing at the raven, and like, get thy beak from out, take thy beak from out my heart, get thy form from off my door. And suddenly he's obviously recounting something that happened a time ago, but at the end of the poem, he's where he was. He's still, and the raven never flitting still is sitting. So there's an incongruity there. So I tried to fill that in, and it's weird, to read it, but I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you got to send it to me.
I was interested enough to attempt that, but I'd never try to pull it off as the Poe poser. you know,
I hear you.
Yeah. So what have we got here?
Let's see.
Yeah, it looks like there's a few questions.
Banning going on. Have any of Poe's books been banned in the near or far past?
Oh, that's another good one. Yeah, there has been a lot of banning and what are they calling it now? Cancel culture or
Yeah.
there has been a lot of that lately. Poe has been safe. I gotta say, he's been safe. Luckily, the psychological horror, I guess, is what people want.
Yeah.
That's one thing they don't want to cancel. But in his own lifetime, one of the first really gruesome horror stories that he published, it's ironically is Berenice, the one that I had suggested to Carl about some teeth extraction.
I'll read that for next Tuesday. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, when he published that one in the early 1830s, people were appalled. They were disgusted. And not to spoil too much of it, but it's about grave desecration and body mutilation and premature burial and all these really disgusting, gruesome, grotesque things. The public were appalled. Poe had to write an apology. He edited the story down a little bit to take away some of those really graphic elements, and then he published it again. But the funny thing was, people were gravitated to it. They were buying the magazine. They were buying his works because that's what they wanted. As appalled as they were by it, they were buying it. They were intrigued by it. So it's funny. It's so ironic that we just love. It's like a train wreck, right? When you can't look away, and it's that theme and that culture in us is still so true today as it was, over 150 years ago.
Well, his life was cut so short. Will there be another Edgar Allan Poe, if not by that name? And do we need another Edgar Allan Poe? Or is he that singular?
Yeah, I think Poe is the one and only. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in contemporary times that have come close. I mean, Stephen King has pretty much been known now for in I guess in our time as the horror guy, the horror writer of our time, but still it doesn't match Poe. He was the first. He was at the right place at the right time, and he did it first. So you can't really replace him. He was the first. He won.
So we have a question. What's your favorite Poe piece and why? Can be a poem or.
Oh, that's a great question. So one, and this is one I don't really share too often, and I think this will be a good time to do it. The Conqueror Worm, a poem by Poe. And that's always been pretty special to me. I actually have the last stanza tattooed on my on my rib cage. It's a really great poem. I know, right? I have all kinds of crazy Poe tattoos.
Well, you have a little tiny one that you added, and it's not too like a year ago or something. I don't know if we have a picture of that.
Oh, that one. That's a more recent one. That's Poe himself. It doesn't get more Poe than that. That's him.
Yeah.
All right on my arm. The other side of my arm is his wife Virginia. And you can see in that picture the raven on my chest, and I have a tooth on my ankle for Berenice and all that. I'm just like a walking Poe art exhibit, I guess. I don't know.
Now, if you gain weight, we can know what Poe would look like if he was
right when he gets a little bloated. We'll know what he looks like after the effects of the alcohol when he starts to bloat up a little bit. I'll start bulking up on my carbs and stuff, and we'll see. We'll experiment with that.
Let's go back to Greg's.
Yeah. Yes. You know what? I think one dish of their apple crisp will pretty much do it.
Oh yeah.
I'll take you to Greg's as a thanks for this. You knew you weren't getting paid. So now I have to ask, and I didn't mean this to be so much about Poe. Well, it's been about you mostly, but
a good combination of both. I'm honored to be able to talk a little bit about Poe and about me and about the connection. It's something I don't get to do very often. The tours are all about Poe. I don't often talk about myself, so this is a nice little treat for me.
The tours, will you be picking that up again this summer?
Yeah, so the regular tour season I like to run from like late September to mid-November. That's like prime weather, prime time. You know, the leaves are starting to turn. You're getting that crisp fall air. It's the perfect time for Poe. Not only that, but Poe and Whitman's whole courtship took place from late September to late December, but it's still that prime time. So you're really in the essence of the whole Poe Whitman debacle, you know. But I do private tours. So anyone who finds my website, there's a spot there to contact me. You can reach out, and if you want to book a private tour, I'm always down to meet up and just give a private tour to whoever, you know, would like one. I enjoy it. And, you know, so you don't have to wait for the regular tour season, you know.
That's great.
Yeah.
In addition to being a fantastic Poe tour and, you know, learning about Whitman, whom a lot of people don't know about her, don't know, you know,
right.
You know,
and that's
her name. That's about it. And it's a great tour of that section of Providence, just to walk around with somebody who knows, you know, what the buildings are and
let's book them,
a little bit
Daniel.
of history about it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. It is. And I do like to highlight Whitman because she's a super underrated kind of character, just in his history in general, but especially in Poe's life. You know, she did so much more than what we think. And so you learn about that on the course of the tour. And,
you don't see her on lists of famous women in Rhode Island, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I said we should I told Elise perhaps we should introduce you as the Poe detective. And Elise right away said, "Oh, the police."
Yeah. Yep. I would be I'm the Poe in Providence. I just need a badge.
Yeah. Soon we'll run out of time, but I wanted to ask, what killed Edgar Allan Poe?
What killed?
It's like saying, did Lizzie Borden do it?
I know this is the age-old question.
I'm not going to answer it, but just elaborate a little bit.
So I think there are over 20 theories on how Poe died. The short answer is we don't know what killed Poe. Everything about his death, the circumstances around his death are all a mystery. He went missing for 5 days. He turned up in a tavern in Baltimore that was being used as a polling place at the time. He was wearing tattered clothes that weren't his. He was totally out of it. They brought him to a hospital, and he lingered in and out for about 4 more days. And then he just died. His last words were, "Lord, help my poor soul." And he was never fully coherent enough to tell anybody what had happened, what had transpired over the last week or two, and why he was in the condition that he was in. Where was his belongings? Where was his clothes? But some of the theories include cooping, which was a form of political kidnapping. They used to kidnap people, use them as repeat voters, give them drugged alcohol and change out their clothes to dupe the voting judges, even though the judges knew exactly what was going on. And that's a likely theory. A brain tumor, cholera, rabies, heart disease, the list goes on and on. It's, murder is one of them. It's incredible, but we just will never know. Poe, the creator of the mystery genre, left us with the greatest mystery in history, and we can appreciate that, I think, for what it is.
Who put that up there?
Oh no. Yeah, that's me. I'm just a Poe boy and nobody loves me. And that's fine.
Are you going to make any changes to your program with the Poe? I mean, it's always expanding. You're always learning. You're so knowledgeable about Poe and his history and Sarah Helen Whitman and their union, but you like to say that you're always learning. You always pick up on something.
Yeah, there's always something new that I learn or discover, and that sometimes alters the way I guide a tour. And the crowd, the audience, the attendees are always what gauge how the tour is, they gauge how the tour is going to go, which is great. So when you can go on the tour multiple times and get a different experience, because that engagement from the audience, you get different perspectives, you get people who ask different questions, and the conversation ends up being different, and you learn something new or something else, aside from just the regular script.
You verify, what they've said, and you add it to the tour. I know, you had somebody join in that was an expert on Poe geography.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then they're giving the geographical points, and
A Facebook user just posted Reynolds.
Oh, that was the name he was calling out repeatedly up until he died. So he died around 5 a.m. on Sunday, October 7th, and Saturday night, October 6th, the night before, repeatedly calling out this name, Reynolds, Reynolds. You know, he'd go on for hours. He'd stop for a minute, then keep going. You know, some he'd get quieter, he'd get louder, and nobody knows. To this day, Poe scholars have scoured everything about Poe. They cannot find a Reynolds anywhere in his life. We don't know. Was Reynolds the guy that killed him? Did this guy Reynolds have anything to do with the condition he was in when he was found? We don't know.
You got a compliment from an esteemed colleague of ours, Chris DeCesare. He said, Levi's knowledge and positivity are both refreshing and interesting. I would say
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I try to make it fun, because too often you get these kind of like old fuddy-duddy, uptight scholar people that you can't have a conversation with. You know, it's just they know what they know, and you don't know anything. But I don't like to approach it like that. You know, everyone wants to learn, and you know, just because I might know Poe on a broader scope than some of the people that come on the tour, I'm not looking, you know, like, hey, I'm here to inform you. No, I'm here to have a conversation with you. I want to, you know, talk about Poe. I want to fill you in on some things that you might not have known, or elaborate on things that you knew, and maybe even learn something from you. I mean, there's plenty of things that people bring to my attention that I'm like, oh, I never heard that, or I never knew that. Let me look it up. Or, you know, I'm always try to be positive, and like I want to have a conversation. Like I want to, you know, appreciate Poe with everyone, you know. Yeah, so I'm glad that people are saying that and noticing that.
Yeah.
Lovely show. Thank you all. I've resolved to believe the star-crossed lovers are together in some form now.
In the ether.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they've had their resolve somewhere in the high order of the stars, as Whitman had said in her poem to Poe. So
I think if anybody should be a ghost, it's Edgar Allan Poe. You know,
you think?
Yeah, well, he's earned it.
He earned it. He'd make such a cool ghost, you know.
Yeah.
I think he had enough of this earth, though. Like in his own lifetime, I think when he passed, he was like, "All right, I'm moving on. Let's go. I don't want to stay back there. That place is awful."
Yeah.
Some people say they've seen him, even on these. Well, that's very romanticized. I think that they've seen the ghost of Edgar Allan Poe on the steps of the Athenaeum. In the Providence Ghost Tour, that's always related.
Yes, and I find that story interesting. You know, I'm not a skeptic. I'm not, you know, I definitely believe in people's experiences with the paranormal, and I don't doubt Poe has been seen by some. You know, he could very well be out there.
When the Poe exhibit was based at the Athenaeum for a time, the Providence Athenaeum, did you get to see that lock of his hair and some of his affectation? I mean,
yes, yes, I did. That was incredible. The bust of Poe that they had on display was actually from my personal collection. So the bust by Edmund Quinn, and so that was on display next to his hair, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And if you go to the Athenaeum now and you go through the front entrance and you turn around and look up, you see that bust of Poe that's right on a pedestal right below the windows of the art room. So that was copied from mine. So
wow.
So now the Athenaeum has Poe with them forevermore, and I can't be more happier about that. You know, he's
fantastic.
He's in his rightful place at the Athenaeum, right in Providence. You know, I love it.
Have you ever had anything strange or eerie happen during the Poe tours, the walking tours you give, like borderline supernatural?
You know, it's funny. I'm so transfixed on the energy of the crowd and how I'm relating the history. I tend to tune a lot out. So I think maybe after some time, when I get even more comfortable and more conditioned on the tour, I can start observing a little bit more than just the audience. And I'm sure there have been some weird things. You know, I've had a few people tell me they felt a little uneasy at certain stops, or that they were feeling like a sense of Poe and Whitman. And I don't know if that's just, you know, because they're hearing the history firsthand at a physical location, or it could be that paired with the fact that, yeah, maybe, their energies, maybe their spirits, and especially Whitman's, because Providence was her home for 99% of her life. Maybe they're still lingering around, maybe Whitman herself, maybe she's still lingering around, and Providence was a
Maybe
favorite.
you just give a heck of a tour and you bring them.
And maybe no, I don't know. She loved to stroll down Benefit Street. She was always deep in thought, and I think maybe still, if her spirit is still here, maybe she's still doing that.
Or in the words of H.P. Lovecraft, we espy amongst the graves the shade of Poe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where Poe once walked.
Where
Yes.
Poe once walked. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good note. Well, I think that's about the best way we can close this talk, this conversation we've had. I don't want to. I'd go on for another hour.
I know. If you let me talk, we'll be all here all night, I'm sure. Especially when it's Poe and Whitman.
I just got a compliment from Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's support. I mean, I'm glad people are interested in this topic. It makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing.
Definitely. Nobody else around here is doing just what you're doing, and nobody anywhere is doing it just as you are. Of course.
Right, with the right amount of information, the right amount of, it's interesting. It's not, like you said, it's not academic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll be on one. We couldn't make it this past year in 2022. Something.
Well, so far, you are the only guest we've had on the show that has actually used the word lugubrious.
I love that word. You know who taught me that word? My gym teacher in high school. Yeah, he used to love to do a vocab word before every gym class, but not anything that was had to do with anatomy or exercise or your muscles, or it was just these random vocab words. And the first one was lugubrious, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome.
Very useful for you.
It is. I like that. The word means how it sounds.
Yeah.
Lugubrious,
Lugubrious, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Obsequious doesn't have quite the same charm. It doesn't roll off the tongue.
Right.
But lugubrious,
it's just, I love it. I always try to sneak it in.
Perhaps it's onomatopoeic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even want to close this now. I want to keep you talking. And again,
get me going.
Well, we'll take you out to Greg's for that.
Yes,
sounds good.
Soon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, we can't let the night go by without showing this picture.
Oh, what do we got?
Oh, there she is. Ginny Poe.
See,
oh my gosh. She made a guest appearance.
Yeah.
That was on Halloween. We were supposed to be Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, but I was told I picked the wrong shade of green for the shirt. So
yes, it's a cute picture anyway.
I'm so glad you shared that with us. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'm glad Ginny made an appearance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you very much, and have a good night.
Yes, you as well. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
I love that picture.